Hello, I am Jason and welcome to another episode of Historically Marked. This is my first Indiana episode, and fittingly in Vincennes, which calls itself Indiana's first city, or oldest city. But I am outside a national park here, just not too far from the Wabash River, or not too far from Illinois border for that matter too. But I'm at the George Rogers Clark Historic Site and National Park. And so there's lots to see, so much history. I mean, I can't even go into details because I want to kind of keep this a little brief one, but or not too brief, if you know what I mean. But we're going to walk around and we're going to go inside that monument and check out some other things. So here we go. All right, so behind those trees, you can kind of see it. It's the monument. And again, we're going to go inside there. But they recommend people start at the visitor center, which is just right over there. If you want to buy like national park souvenirs or even like patches, pins, or be like me, get my passport stamped, you can definitely do that. They also show a half-hour-long documentary about this, so definitely worth checking out. I have not seen it, but for those who really want to get into it or are into it. And here is the first historical marker we encounter. There are some others around this site, but I probably won't be able to visit all of them. But here's Fort Sackville, which we are literally on. They believe that this 1 acre was it. So here it is. And this was the spot where the British were defeated, in this exact spot. British Lieutenant Governor Edward Abbott in 1777. It was constructed by him. Fort Sackville was one of several forts spread throughout the frontier during the American Revolution. It was pretty much to protect the Illinois territory and the western part of it that spread all the way to St. Louis, which was already a city by that time, but it was owned by the Spanish and then the French. And then Lieutenant Governor Henry Hamilton arrived in late 1778. He considered the fort insufficient and originally planned to have it rebuilt. Instead, a more practical plan was enacted to approve on Abbott's stockade with the construction of 2 blockhouses. But then Hamilton ran out of time for additional improvements with George Rogers Clark's surprise attack on February 23rd, 1779. And here's a little did you know thing. Alright, so we're going to walk up that way. George Rogers Clark was a natural-born leader, as the historians note. He had qualities common among heroes, you know, in real life. Like, he was a magnetic leader, he had the positive energy, persuasive orator, and he was a master of psychological warfare. He had the capacity to plan and think strategically. He also understood native tribal customs, habits of thought, and warfare. He mounted a spirited defense of American immigrants to Kentucky country, which is obviously the Kentucky state, as we know today. But back then, it was known as the Western Counties of Virginia. But he wanted to expand the United States just right after we won, you know, against the British. But the British were still claiming this territory. Now, this marker right here talks about the Wabash River and how it played an important part of American history. It began in Ohio. And I did not realize it was 475 miles long, but then again, it's not straight, so very crooked once it gets into Indiana, into the state in Ohio. But the Miami Indian tribes named it Wabashiki, which roughly translates to pure white. Now over there is the statue of Francis Vigo. He was taken prisoner by Hamilton, and somehow Vigo was able to convince him that he was not a threat to him, but he actually was. But it was all part of George Rogers Clark's plan to take this territory right here. Now right in front of me is just a site of Fort Sackville, captured by Colonel George Rogers Clark from the British, February 25th, 1779. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, important thing I forgot to mention, is George Rogers Clark was the older brother of William Clark, you know, the Lewis and Clark duo. And, you know, we all know that they were successful explorers that made the West more available to the United States. But I'm going to go ahead and go inside that monument now. They said it was okay that I can take photos and video, and so yeah, these steps. And that is the only entrance, by the way, so there's no other way of getting in. All right, here we go. Now, as you walk in, you'll be greeted by the statue that was done by Herman A. McNeil. I'll get to that in a second. And all these murals that were done by Ezra Winter. Plus, there's a lot of indoor historical markers that detail the whole journey of George Rogers Clark and how he got here and the British defeat. But also get a look at the ceiling and notice that my voice echoes. This is one of my favorite quotes by George Rogers Clark that is engraved right here. Hang on. All right, if a country is not worth protecting, it is not worth keeping, or claiming, I'm sorry. And then get a good look at this massive sculpture. This, of course, is not the only sculpture of Clark. There is one in Metropolis, Illinois, among other places. And if you need to sit down, there's a bench all around. That is the Lincoln Memorial Bridge. That takes you back into Illinois, where you'll see the monument, which I'll do a video on shortly. And straight ahead is downtown Vincennes, and down there is the old cathedral and some more historical markers, so follow me. So once you leave the memorial, you'll see some history about the actual one with these two National Park Service markers. Here's the first one on the left. The W.R. Heath Construction Company of Greencastle, Indiana, which is not too far from here, won the bid to build the George Rogers Clark Memorial. It featured an exterior of granite with the interior clad of Indiana limestone and 3 types of elaborate marble. Warm winter weather, those 3 W's go together, allowed for a quick construction. And the work was finished on May 1933. But there was other additional work to be made on the grounds, such as like shrubs, trees, you know, the landscaping part. Plans for a museum in the memorial basement had to be scrapped due to lack of funds. I don't think it would have worked out anyway. That building's great enough, meaning the visitor center. Statues of Clark's allies, Father Pierre Gabault and Francis Vigo, rounded out the park landscape. After all these final touches, the memorial was ready to be dedicated by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt on June 14th, 1936. Now, what is not mentioned, in 1966, Lyndon Johnson, who was president at the time, he dedicated this as a national park. And he spoke on those steps. I don't know exactly where, it is not marked, but I thought that was worth pointing out. And this talks about inside the memorial where we were. Those murals were again made by Ezra Winter. I can tell they were made by canvas. I mean, I know he didn't literally go in there and you know, do it. All right, well, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Historically Marked. This, again, is my first Indiana episode. Hope to make some more pretty soon all around the state. But I thought it was very fitting that I did it here, right here in Vincennes at a very important national park and a very important part of American history. So, all right, I am Jason for Historically March, sign off.